Fox News Podcasts presents the Bret Baier Podcast with Fox News chief political anchor Bret Baier.
On Monday, Hamas and Israel began implementing the initial stages of the peace plan brokered by President Trump, raising the prospect of a lasting peace possibly in the region for the first time in recent history. In Egypt, world leaders gathered in a show of unity, many praising the deal as a potential blueprint for resolving other global conflicts. President Trump speaking to Middle East leaders, congratulating them on the achievement.
With the historic agreement we've just signed, those prayers of millions have finally been answered. As you know, the hostages have been returned, and further work goes on having to do with the, sadly to say, bodies. Together we've achieved what everybody said was impossible. At long last, we have peace in the Middle East, and it's a very simple expression, peace in the Middle East, and we've heard it for many years, but nobody thought it could ever get there, and now we're there.
Meanwhile, back at home, the government shutdown extends into week 2 as Republicans and Democrats remain in a deadlock over Affordable Care Act subsidies set to expire at the end of the year. Lots to discuss with the panel this week. Former Deputy Chief of Staff to George W. Bush, Karl Rove, USA Today Washington Bureau Chief Susan Page, and Fox News Middle East Correspondent Steve Harrigan reporting from Tel Aviv. Steve, first to you, the day after all of the trips and the reunions that we saw from living hostages being released by Hamas, what is the fallout there and the prospect for a long-term shift in the paradigm in the region?
In the short term, it's been a lot of emotion, some amazing reunions between former hostages and their family members, really the pictures that everyone here in Israel was waiting for, and then some details about what people underwent. Some of those hostages pretty much chained up in underground tunnels for 2 years. One man said he lost all sense of space and time. So a real glimpse of joy and of barbarism, too, at the same time. So that's really been the focus on these 20 live hostages who've come out. But like you say, some real potential problems ahead. Will Hamas disarm? Can they rebuild a devastated Gaza? And who's going to govern? Really basic questions. Phase 2, not resolved yet.
Yeah. And Steve, in the Israeli press, in the coverage of the region, does it feel different that there's Arab buy-in to some of this, or is it kind of amorphous as far as what that's going to look like?
It feels optimistic. There is a sense of momentum. I think people were surprised by how things went, and I think there's hope here. You don't say it often in this part of the world, but that's what people are feeling.
Karl, do you buy that this is a different effort here? I mean, it's a ceasefire right now. It's the release of the hostages. They're hoping to get all the bodies back of those deceased hostages in coming days. Do you think this is a big picture?
Yes, I do. Now, whether it's achieved or not is another question, but if you read that list of 20 elements of this peace plan, and remember, it's not the peace plan that has been endorsed only by Israel and the United States, but by all the other major players in the region, the Saudis, the Egyptians, the Turks, Qatar, UAE, etc. It's a pretty remarkable document. Now, whether it's achievable or not, in a way, the 3 easy things have been done. The hostages released, military pulling back, the Israelis releasing a large number of Palestinians, 250 people who were sentenced to life in prison, and 1,700 who had been arrested since October 7th. So, the rest of the stuff is difficult, but the fact that the region seems united in it, and particularly against the backdrop of what has happened, Iran has been decimated, its nuclear program, Syria has flipped, hopeful noises there. Hezbollah in Lebanon has lost control of that country, and their vast arsenal of missiles has been decimated. All these things have combined to provide an opening. Let's see if it can be taken care.
Yeah. Susan, there is optimism from the president as he talks about this. I think a little bit more cautiousness from the region. I had a spokesperson on from Qatar last night on the show speaking for the prime minister saying there's just a lot of things we have to work out.
Well, we know from previous positive, optimistic things happening in the Middle East how hard it is to keep it going. But I do think that some of the things that make President Trump so controversial here at home made it possible for him to reach the deal that was reached in the short term and raises the possibility, at least, of some momentum that keeps it going. You know, he stuck with Netanyahu when much of the world had parted ways with the prime minister because of his execution of the war in Gaza. That gave him the authority to push Netanyahu to accept the deal at the end when there were parts of it that he wasn't enthusiastic about it. And, you know, in a way, Trump's willingness to order military action against those Venezuelan boats that he says are linked to drug cartels, I think that told Hamas that when Trump threatened obliteration if they didn't go along with this, he meant it. And I think that had to be a real encouragement to Hamas to sign on as well. So it's always safer to bet on the pessimistic side of events in the Middle East. But I think that President Trump actually deserves quite a bit of credit already. And there is some hope that there is a shift in what is kind of stalled reconciliation and peace in the Middle East for so long.
Yeah, I agree with you on the Venezuela boats, and I think it's of the same mindset of peace through strength after the Iran Operation Midnight Hammer with the B-2 bomber taking out the nuclear facility inside Iran. Steve, I wonder how you see that if those moves with Iran and taking that chess piece kind of at least on the back part of the board, not supporting Hamas as openly, changed the dynamic that led to yesterday.
I think it's interesting to link things you wouldn't ordinarily link, like Venezuela and the situation here, and also to see unpredictability, which is often a negative, as a real strength here in his negotiating. And also just to see the president's political skill, the naked skill really in the Knesset, working that room in a foreign country to get standing ovation one after the other. When he said Israel is a little dot in the Middle East, and yet somehow you achieve so much, you could see he had their number. They stood and they roared for a foreign leader who knew how to work the room.
Panel, we'll hold it right there. Well, speaking of working the room, neither Democrats nor Republicans are working in the room when it comes to the government shutdown, Karl. It continues apace. It seems like it's a different monster this time in that Republicans are on the side of a clean CR, a continuing resolution funding the government at the same levels, and Democrats want to change about these health care subsidies before the end of the year. How do you see this playing out politically? And, we're starting to get to the point where checks are going to be missed.
Yeah. Well, this is on track to be, it already is one of the three biggest shutdowns we've ever seen, and it's likely to be in there for, number one or number two by the time we're finished. Both sides seem stuck. Behind the scenes, there are probably discussions going on, particularly in the Senate, between Republican and Democrat decision makers on the budget. And that's where we're likely to see some movement. But I don't think we're going to see that movement for some time yet. There is a deal to be made about the continuation of these subsidies, but they're going to have to be give and take on both sides. The Republicans are going to want to put limits on the income of the people who can receive them. The Democrats are going to want a continuation of the lower income subsidies. There's a deal to be made here, but it ain't going to happen quickly.
Susan, just to be clear, these subsidies are needed basically because Obamacare, as it was set up, the Affordable Care Act, created these pools that they envisioned that the market would drive down the prices. And they just didn't see it. They didn't see those prices driving down. So then a Democratic administration with a Democratic Congress set up these subsidies to keep those prices lower. They're set to expire at the end of the year. Fair discussion of that?
Oh, you bet. Hey, good luck taking away a benefit that people have gotten used to.
Exactly.
Karl Rove was around when the White House pushed through the Medicare Part D drug benefit. What if that had turned out to be more expensive than the government had expected, and there were an effort to I realize that those weren't temporary measures, but it's a very hard thing to take away a benefit. And what's more, both sides seems to be having a wonderful time with this shutdown. I think Chuck Schumer thinks it's working for Democrats in general and working for him in particular. And I think President Trump thinks this is a pretty good talking point for him. So I think something has to happen for there to even be any serious talks about what to do to open the government again.
And as far as a political blame game, is anybody leading or any horse getting a little nose up on the other?
Well, I do think President Trump is a master politician, and Republicans have a strong point that if you agreed to a short-term extension, we would talk about extending those that premium relief. So that seems like intellectually a strong point, but core Democratic voters are so eager for a fight and so eager to see Democrats in Washington stand up against the president that I think this is also working for some of them. And the saner heads in Washington who say maybe it's not a good idea to keep the federal government shut down for a month, they are not at the moment in the majority.
And Steve, from the world view, is the world looking at us as strong because of what had happened yesterday and all of the world leaders that are signing on, or scratching their head and say, how could this world power not have a government running?
I think you have a situation where the U.S. president is tremendously popular outside of the U.S. There's just no doubt about it on both sides here, Arab and Israeli.
Yeah, that seems clear. Last thing, Karl. As you look at the crystal ball ahead of 26, a lot depends on how people feel about their own economy, feel about their situation. We're starting to get into that crucial time. Any thoughts about it as we head to the next year?
Well, in the immediate aftermath of what we saw in the Middle East, let's remember American voters in midterms tend to sort of pocket these successes on the international front. Dwight Eisenhower ended the hostilities in Korea with an armistice 7 months into office, and in the next midterms, the Democrats gained 2 in the Senate, 19 in the House, and 8 governor's offices. And of course, President George H.W. Bush, 41, oversaw the short, successful first Gulf War, and 8 months after it ended, Democrats picked up a Senate seat and 7 House seats. So internationally, this is not going to have much impact. I think you're right. At the end of the day, the election of 2026 is going to be about the economy and change versus more of the same being the dominant themes.
We will see. Got some time. Thanks, panel. And now for a bit of history. On October 14th, 1947, U.S. Air Force pilot Chuck Yeager became the first man to break the sound barrier, reaching Mach 1.05 in an experimental aircraft during a test flight over the Mojave Desert. 2 days before the test, Yeager suffered 2 broken ribs in a horse riding accident, but concerned about being removed from the mission, he kept that information secret, getting a doctor to tape his ribs and using a sawed-off broom handle as a lever to help close the aircraft's hatch. The plane used in the original flight, dubbed X-1 Glennis, after Yeager's wife, is still on display at the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. You can hear more of this series at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you download podcasts. Make sure to leave a rating and review. We want to hear from you. For Susan, Karl, and Steve, I'm Bret Baier. We'll see you next time. Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.